we know that the Liberals are trying to get this through the legislature, playing this shell game with the people's crown jewel. Rates are going to go up. We're not going to have any additional improvement to infrastructure to show for it. So now I want to go back to something that the Financial Accountability Officer said, our leader Patrick Brown has talked about in this legislature over and over, and I refer to page 45 of the budget. Now, I took a section of page 45 of the budget out, and in the recent issue of Fedeli Focus on Finance, it was all about the facts about the sale of Hydro One. You can go on Fedeli.com, which is my legislative site, because this is not a political document. This is a fact-fed document, and you can download this, Speaker. And it is Facts by Fedeli. We could change it. Thank you. So let's just go and see what we're talking about, Speaker. Again, in the 2014 budget, the 2015 budget on page 45 quotes what they had presented in the 2014 budget. So I'm going to talk about that for a second. Projected asset optimization target. That's their spin for the selling of the assets. In 2014-15, it's $1.1 billion. In 2015-16, it's $1 billion. The next year, it's $500 million, and the last year, it's $500 million. So they plan on $3.1 billion of asset sales, which included $1.1 billion of the General Motors shares. So excluding those shares, there's $2 billion more over the next 3 years they were going to add into the Trillium Trust for infrastructure. So we know that. That's a fact. It's printed in the 2014 budget, and it's repeated in the 2015 budget. So all of that was to fund $130 billion worth of infrastructure. That was announced in 2014. So again, as our leader Patrick Brown has stated, we've all stated in this legislature many times, the $130 billion of infrastructure was set in 2014 and did not need or include the sale of Hydro One to make it happen. So now they are introducing the sale of Hydro One and pretending it's for the infrastructure. But they didn't need the money. They showed us they did not need that money. They never listed that money. So what is the money really for? Well, we go back to this binder where they are now allowed, when this bill passes, to reimburse the Crown for construction or acquisition of infrastructure. So now we know, the jig's up, Speaker, we now know the sale of Hydro One is to pay back the Crown for the money they're spending on infrastructure. It was never, ever to be new money. They have been telling us one thing when what we have been saying all along is absolutely true, Speaker. We've laid that bare. In fact, back in April of 2015, the Ottawa Citizen figured it out right away. They said, and I quote, "A reasonable person might wonder why we need to sell most of a significant public asset just to keep doing what we have been doing for years. The real answer, I suspect, is that putting some billions of new money into the province's transit trust will enable the government to quietly shift existing money to help it reduce the deficit or pay for other spending." The Ottawa Citizen laid this bare back in April. We have been standing in this legislature day after day, week after week, month after month, saying the same thing, proving it that in their own budget, page 45, they showed us that the sale of the GM shares for $1.1 billion was going into the Transit Trust. But that only left $2 billion over the next 3 years to raise, Speaker. This has all been an awful, awful shell game, Speaker. And I think when the Financial Accountability Officer laid this nonsense in front of us as well, he called it for what it really is. They're broke. They've overspent. I'll talk about some of the spending in the next few pages, Speaker. They got caught. They can't balance their own budget. In fact, the Financial Accountability Officer told us after his report, his independent report on the hydro sale, a week later he came out with another independent report on the state of our finances and said, no. They're not going to balance the budget in 2017-18. It'll be off by $3.5 billion. Now, what they've done so far, Speaker, is quietly borrowed against the in the energy sector, $4 billion. Didn't tell us about it. I'm pretty sure that's already frittered away, Speaker. So they're digging deeper in the couch now for bigger nickels and dimes. Maybe we're up to quarters and loonies now. They're digging in the couch for money. They are going to find it in the pension tax. They're certainly going to find it in the upcoming carbon tax. But excluding those, we now know that the sale of Hydro One, we've laid it bare, the sale of Hydro One is not for transit or infrastructure. It is to bail them out from their deficit. Speaker, we then move on to other areas of this presentation. We'll talk about alcohol reform. We support greater market access and the liberalization of beer sales in Ontario. Plain and simple. We always have. That being said, the government's idea of freeing up beer sales is writing more and more regulations and rules. Limits on where to sell, how much you can sell. All they're doing is bundling this up in a big hunk of red tape with a bow on the top of it, Speaker. The Premier called this, when she was distracting us from the sale of Hydro One, that announcement, she called this the biggest innovation in alcohol and since the Prohibition. I'm thinking, selling a six-pack in a corner store, this is your big deal? Speaker, if you live in Northern Ontario, in rural Ontario, there's 218 places that already sell beer and wine outside of a beer store or a liquor store. Maybe in the GTA, you're not aware of that. But I can tell you, if I want to drive to Nipissing Township and go into Young's General Store, you can get your fishing license there. You can gas up, get your boat oil and gas, and they also have a hand-painted sign outside that says beer and wine for sale. You can go to Young's General Store on Nipissing Township and buy beer and wine today. This is not a big revelation. This is not the six-pack at the corner store that, is the greatest thing since Prohibition. The Premier said that. Said it more than once.
She must have been drinking.
I can drive, North Bay where I live is 45 minutes from the Quebec border. And we have a big company, Tembec, that's just across the border where there's cheaper energy, by the way, Speaker. So the 1,000 employees there enjoy that opportunity. But you drive to Tembec from North Bay and you stop at the little corner store, the store, the only store on the way there, in LD, Ontario. Again, you can pick up a fishing license. You can buy gas. It's the only gas station on the way there. And again, a little hand-painted sign, beer and wine for sale. You can whip in there and stock up on the way to the cottage if that's what you want to do. But again, this is no big revelation. There's 218 places like that. A lot of them are in northern and rural Ontario. So this is the big deal. Maybe it's a big deal in Toronto, but I'll tell you, Speaker, it's been going on every single day that I can remember.
Can you still get an Ontario Northland ticket there for the train?
Well, no, I'm afraid the train's been cancelled, but that's part of the earlier scandals that we'll get into shortly here.
Just wanted to make sure.
So Ontario brewers, Speaker, want a fair opportunity to sell their product. We all understand that. But the Wynne Liberals here, their decision to limit the annual supermarket beer sales to the equivalent of less than 300 six-packs a day isn't going to have a significant impact on job creation in the province. Again, Speaker, a lot of this is big smoke and mirrors so that we be talking about this rather than the fire sale of Ontario Hydro. Only this government, Speaker, would penalize a company for being too successful. We seem to do that in Ontario a lot. Rather than foster growth and encourage business, these people want to place arbitrary caps on sales for providing a successful service to Ontario. My God, you're doing well. We better stop you. We better tax you, figure out how to tax you, or figure out how to stop.
Well, they've already got it, I'm sure.
Contraband tobacco is another issue. Every single fall and again in the spring budget, Minister of Finance, he gloats about how he's going to crack down on contraband tobacco in Ontario. but never does a thing. I've been here 4 years listening to it. As mayor of the city of North Bay for 2 terms before that, I listened to it. And, you know, there's 12 years of listening to all talk and no action whatsoever, Speaker. This bill that's in that black binder, it increases the reporting mechanisms for raw leaf producers, but it takes no reasonable action to crack down on illegal sales, Speaker. Wow. So our MPP Todd Smith's bill, the Smoke-Free Schools Act, takes that action by suspending a driver's license if they are caught transporting tobacco and creates education programs for kids. If the minister really wanted to do something, was serious about contraband tobacco, he'd put that bill within this omnibus legislation, Speaker, because Todd Smith's bill is a bill that everybody in this legislature should get behind. So let's take a second, Speaker, and talk about the motivation behind this Bill 144. First of all, as this legislature knows full well, the Deputy Premier told us loudly and clearly on W5 only a couple weeks ago that, quote, "We're out of money." Shocking. I watched that W5 and I almost fell over when I heard her say that. Of course, we've been saying that, you know, since the day we got here, but finally the light went on, and according to our Deputy Premier, haven't heard the Finance Minister come out with that yet, but the Deputy Premier has said, we're out of money. So we're going to talk about why, Speaker, that we're out of money. Well, as we look across the street here to the south, the Mars building, of course, the people within Mars do exceptional work. It's an important component of economic development and research in Ontario. But the building that they're in has nothing to do with the good work that they do. Correct. The building that they're in was owned by a United States-owned real estate firm that was struggling and about to be in serious trouble, and this government, again, without any knowledge of the legislature. This only came out, Speaker, during the last election when we were handed a brown envelope that gave us the details, and the facts came out. We only seem to get the facts when either the Financial Accountability, the Auditor General, the OPP, or the envelopes come under the door. That's the only time in this legislature that I've seen that we've actually got facts. So the brown envelope comes under the door, and it told us that a U.S. realtor was being paid approximately $410 million to be bailed out. That's where, when people say, well, Vic, what would your party do? Well, you stop that kind of expenditure. That's only one that we found. Can you imagine, Speaker, how many of these deals have been done that we do not know about? But we found out through an envelope under the door that proved out to be correct, that this government bailed out the U.S.-owned realtor from this building. Cost taxpayer about $410 million. I think there's still more of that coming out, all the revelations. It was always deny, deflect, and in the gas plant scandal, delete. That's what we know from this government. It was always denying that until the hard, cold facts came out in additional freedom of information requests. We now know the real truth about that. Cost the taxpayer, cost us all $410 million. Then, of course, there's the $1.1 billion spent to cancel 2 gas plants. You know, that's I could take up my remaining 25 minutes I could use just talking about the gas plant scandal because, you know, as
2 billion reasons why.
Yeah, as you know, Speaker, the government insisted that it cost $40 million to cancel when it took an Auditor General to prove to us and the rest of the province that it's actually $1.1 billion. So again, when they say, Vic, what would you guys do different? Well, there's a pretty good example of the kind of waste and scandal that surrounds this government, which when you go back to the Deputy Premier, when she says, we're out of money. We now know why, Speaker, another billion was spent there. The smart meters, another great example of yet another scandal. All along, we were told it was going to be $1 billion, And then, of course, it took, yet again, another Auditor General's report to come out and tell us that it was true. You mocked me, and I'll tell you, Dalton McGuinty mocked me as well. I remember standing in this legislature, Speaker, and when Dalton McGuinty was telling us it was $40 million, I brought evidence to say it was almost $1 billion. And I stood and said, Speaker, we have proof here that it's $890 million. And I remember the Premier laughing and mocking me, just like I'm being mocked now, and he said, oh, well, pretty soon it's going to be $1 billion. No, wait, it's going to be $2 billion. Well, it took the Auditor General to tell this legislature it really was $1.1 billion, that they had been telling us all along one thing when we knew the exact opposite was true, Speaker. It was $1.1 billion. So keep mocking, keep mocking, keep mocking. They've gone silent, so I'll continue, Speaker. So the smart meters, again,